Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into global migration and displacement. We're going beyond the headlines to understand the human stories. At the heart of it all, we've got a lot to unpack with reports from Panama City, Gaza, and the West Bank. And I have to say, some of these stories are tough, but also incredibly important.
Yeah, it's about understanding the complexities of these situations, moving beyond simplistic narratives
Yeah.
and acknowledging that there are no easy answers.
Exactly. We're going to encounter stories of incredible resilience, but also systemic failures that they're really hard to ignore. So buckle up, because this is going to be a heavy, but hopefully eye-opening journey.
Our first stop is Panama City. It's become a major transit point for migrants heading north, but it's also a bottleneck where many find themselves stranded, facing a whole new set of challenges.
The reports paint a pretty vivid picture. You could almost feel the exhaustion and desperation in these overcrowded shelters. What really struck me was the sheer number of people arriving, often with just the clothes on their backs and very little else. It's putting immense pressure on resources, basic sanitation, even access to clean water.
And it's important to remember why. People are making this journey in the first place. We're not just talking about economic migrants seeking better opportunities. Many are fleeing violence, persecution, or the devastating effects of climate change. In their home countries, they're risking everything for a chance at a safer, more stable life.
It makes you wonder, if you were in their shoes, facing unimaginable hardship, what would you do? Would you risk it all for a chance at something better?
It's a question that challenges our empathy and understanding. And the situation in Panama City is just one snapshot of a much larger global crisis.
One of the reports focused on a young boy in one of these shelters, overwhelmed by everything around him. He whispers to his mother, "It looks like a zoo." Such a simple observation, but it really gets to you, doesn't it?
It's heartbreaking. It speaks to the disorientation and trauma these families experience, the feeling of being caught in a system that doesn't seem to care about their well-being.
And for many, the journey doesn't end in Panama City. We have to talk about deportations, specifically Central American migrants being sent back to some of the poorest and most dangerous nations in the world. What happens to them when they're forced to return?
That's a critical question. We're talking about people who have already endured incredible hardship, risked their lives to get here, and are now being sent back to face potentially even worse conditions.
One story that really stuck with me was about Maria, a mother of 5, who was deported and separated from her children. During the process, can you imagine the anguish and desperation she must have felt?
It highlights the human cost of these policies. And it's not just individual stories. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, released a report that found 40% of deportees face threats or violence upon return. It really raises questions about the ethical and humanitarian implications of these policies.
It's almost like we're setting them up for failure. If they're fleeing violence and persecution, sending them back without adequate support just perpetuates the cycle of hardship and displacement.
And we have to consider the broader context here. There are growing concerns about the disproportionate treatment of certain migrant groups based on their nationality, ethnicity, or religion. It raises questions about fairness, equality, and the role of international law in protecting the rights of migrants.
Right. Are we applying these policies consistently and fairly? Or are there biases at play that are influencing these decisions? It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but we can't just shy away from these difficult conversations.
Absolutely. We need to acknowledge the complexities, understand the factors driving migration, and critically examine the systems and policies that are shaping these people's lives.
Okay, so we've seen the desperation and hardship in Panama City and the challenges of deportation. Now, let's shift gears a bit and head over to Gaza, where there's a glimmer of hope in the form of some pretty ambitious infrastructure plans.
Yes. Officials from Egypt and Tunisia have announced plans to expand water access by 20% and upgrade the electricity grid to reduce outages by a whopping 50%. It's a massive undertaking. But if they can pull it off, it could be transformative for the people of Gaza.
So paint a picture for me. What kind of impact would these changes have on daily life? We're talking about a region that's been through so much conflict and hardship, right?
Imagine fewer disruptions to healthcare and education, more reliable access to clean water, the ability to run businesses and homes without constant power outages. It's about creating a sense of stability and normalcy that's been absent for far too long.
And it sounds like there's some serious financial backing For these efforts, too, President Trump's proposed $1.5 billion aid package could be a game changer if it materializes. It has the potential to create jobs, stimulate economic growth, and attract
foreign investment.
It's a bold move, and it's generating a lot of discussion. Some are optimistic about the potential for positive change, while others are more cautious, pointing to the complex political landscape and the potential for corruption or mismanagement of funds.
So what do you think? Is this a genuine opportunity for progress, or are we setting ourselves up for disappointment?
It's hard to say, for sure. There are definitely significant challenges, both logistical and political, but we have to acknowledge the potential here for this investment is managed effectively and transparently. It could have a ripple effect, not just on Gaza's economy, but on the overall stability of the region. It's a reminder that investing in infrastructure and development can be a powerful tool for peace and stability, particularly in regions grappling with conflict and poverty. But it's not just about throwing money at the problem. It requires careful planning, accountability, and a genuine commitment to improving people's lives.
Now, let's shift our focus. It's to West Bank, where a recent incident involving Israeli soldiers has sparked a debate about justice and accountability. A 25-year-old Palestinian man was arrested, and there are conflicting accounts of what happened. The soldiers claim they saw a weapon-like object, but the man sustained injuries during the arrest, and there are allegations of excessive force being used.
Wow, that sounds intense. What are the different perspectives on this incident, and how do they reflect the broader tensions in the region?
Well, some argue that the soldiers' actions were justified, given the perceived threat, while others believe the level of force used was disproportionate and raises concerns about potential human rights violations.
It seems like this case could set a precedent for how similar incidents are handled in the future. That's why it's going to military court next month.
Yes. The court will be tasked with scrutinizing the actions of the soldiers and determining whether they acted appropriately, given the circumstances. This case has drawn international attention and is being closely watched by human rights organizations.
It highlights the importance of due process and the need for transparency and accountability, especially in conflict zones where tensions are high and the potential for abuse of power is significant.
Before we move on, I think it's worth circling back to that image of the young boy in Panama City, overwhelmed by his surroundings and whispering, "It looks like a zoo."
Yes, his innocent observation really captures the essence of what we've been discussing. The confusion, the uncertainty, the feeling of being caught in a system that's indifferent to their suffering.
It's a powerful reminder of the human cost of these global crises and the need for empathy and understanding. We can't lose sight of the individuals caught in the crossfire, the families desperately searching for safety and a chance at a better life.
And on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've seen the desperation in Panama City, the potential for progress in Gaza, and the complexities of justice in the West Bank. What stands out to you from all these stories?
What resonates most with me is the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of unimaginable hardship. These individuals and families continue to hope, to dream, to fight for a better future.
That's a powerful takeaway. And it's a reminder that even amidst the darkness, there's always a flicker of light, a spark of human connection that can guide us towards a more just and compassionate world.
We'll delve deeper into these issues in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, because we'll be right back after a short break.
It's fascinating how these stories, though geographically diverse, intertwine to paint a larger picture of global migration and displacement.
That's so true. We've moved from Sierra Leone, desperation of Panama City, to a glimmer of hope in Gaza. It's a stark contrast, isn't it? On one hand, you have families fleeing unimaginable hardship, only to be met with more challenges. And on the other, there's this potential for positive change through infrastructure projects.
The contrast is striking, and it really underscores the complex interplay of factors at play. Political instability, economic disparities, climate change, all of these contribute to the global migration crisis.
It makes you think about the power of directed effort and investment. If these infrastructure projects in Gaza succeed, could they offer a blueprint for other regions struggling with similar challenges?
That's a compelling question. It's certainly worth exploring. While every region has its unique complexities, there could be valuable lessons learned from Gaza's efforts to rebuild and create opportunities
we've talked about,
Yeah.
systemic failures, and the need for accountability. But what does that actually look like in practice? How do we move beyond just acknowledging the problem and start creating real solutions?
Accountability starts with transparency. We need to understand how decisions are made, who benefits, and who bears the brunt of the consequences. It also means holding those in power responsible for their actions, whether it's governments, international organizations, or individuals in positions of authority.
Right. And that's not always easy. There are often competing interests, political agendas,
Yeah.
and a reluctance to admit wrongdoing. But without accountability, how can we ensure that these systems are serving the needs of the most vulnerable?
We need to shift our perspective. Instead of viewing migrants as a problem to be solved, we should see them as individuals with stories, aspirations, and the right to seek a life free from fear and violence.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing our shared humanity. These are people just like us, with families, dreams, and the desire for a better future. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers and statistics, but we can't forget the human faces behind these crises.
What's also fascinating here is the role of narratives. How we frame these stories shapes public perception and ultimately influences policies. Are we focusing on the dangers of migration or the factors that drive people to make these desperate journeys?
It's a great point. It's about challenging those
Yeah.
simplistic narratives. It's not as simple as us versus them. We're all interconnected in this globalized world. The choices we make in one part of the world can have ripple effects across borders.
And it's important to remember that even small actions can make a difference. Supporting organizations, working on the ground, raising awareness in our communities, or even just engaging in informed and compassionate conversations about these issues. It all contributes to creating a more humane and just response to this global crisis.
You know, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of these challenges. But I think your point about small actions is really important. It empowers us, doesn't it? It reminds us that we're not powerless, that we can each play a role in shaping a more just and compassionate world.
Absolutely. Every act of kindness, every effort to understand, every voice raised against injustice, it all matters.
I think this brings us back to the child's question. In Panama City, it looks like a zoo. It's a question that reflects the chaos and uncertainty these families face. It's a question that demands a response. How can we create a world where that child's question is met with hope and possibility instead of echoes of empty promises?
That's the challenge we all face. It's a challenge that requires empathy, understanding, and a willingness to move beyond our comfort zones to create a world where every individual has the opportunity to live a life free from fear and violence, a life filled with hope and dignity.
That's beautifully put. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the desperation in Panama City, the potential for progress in Gaza, the struggle for justice in the West Bank, and the overarching need for accountability and a shift in perspective. It's a lot to process. What's resonating with you as we wrap up this part of our conversation?
I'm struck by the interconnectedness of these stories, how they highlight the global nature of this crisis. And I'm also heartened by the resilience and determination of the individuals we've encountered. It gives me hope. It reminds me that even amidst the darkness, there's always a light shining through.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've really journeyed through a range of emotions today, haven't we?
We have, from those crowded shelters in Panama City to the hopeful infrastructure plans in Gaza and the complexities of justice.
West Bank.
Yeah, we've explored so much, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this global issue, you know.
I think you're right. Migration and displacement, they're multifaceted issues, deeply intertwined with so many other global challenges.
Right.
We've discussed systemic failures, the desperate need for accountability, and the importance of approaching these situations with empathy and understanding.
It circles back to that idea of shared humanity, recognizing that regardless of borders or circumstances, we're all interconnected.
And that's what I hope you take away from this deep dive, that sense of connection and the realization that even small actions can contribute to creating a more just and compassionate world.
It's about using our voices to advocate for change, supporting organizations, doing crucial work on the ground, and simply engaging in these difficult conversations with open hearts and minds.
Before we wrap up, I want to bring us back to that young boy in Panama City whispering, "It looks like a zoo," to his mom. It was such a poignant moment, and it really stuck with me.
That image has stayed with me as well. It speaks volumes about the disorientation and uncertainty these families face.
In a world increasingly defined by borders and barriers, how can we create a future where every child's question about their future is met with hope, not echoes of empty promise?
That's the question we all need to grapple with, isn't it? It's a call to action, to examine our own roles in perpetuating or dismantling systems of injustice.
It's about recognizing that we each have the power to make a difference, whether through individual acts of kindness or collective efforts to hold those in power accountable.
So I leave you with this thought. What steps can you take, however small, to contribute to that vision of a more just and compassionate world? How can you be a beacon of hope for those seeking refuge and opportunity?
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving for a better world. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, take care, everyone.